I'm a guy that's 26. Each day I build with bricks. I like Star Wars playset. I'm Rich Boy J. Hello boyos, Rich Boy J here, back in with another video, and this is going to be a little reflection slash retrospective on everything that has gone down in my life over the past couple of weeks. If you've been living under a rock and you're just not really active on this channel, I took Starkiller base, well, one Starkiller base was completed, and I took it to 2 conventions over the past couple of weeks, and it was hectic to say the least for many different reasons. So I'm gonna basically do what might end up being like a multi-part series, just reflecting on those experiences, beginning to let you guys in on what happened and what was necessary to make Starkiller base possible, because it's a pretty crazy story, honestly. You guys didn't really get to see much of the lead up to it. I was pretty inactive here on this channel, mostly because I was trying to work on the build, but those last few days and even during the convention, just trying to get Starkiller to anywhere near presentable was just such a task. It required so many different people to help me get to that point, all of whom I'm extremely appreciative of. And I just kind of want to like peel back the curtain and let you guys in on what made that possible. So first, I kind of want to set the stage, because we're gonna go back basically before Brick Rodeo. That was, I think, the weekend of like July 22nd, whatever weekend that weekend was. So this is like 2 weeks back, and I had basically completed everything in Starkiller except for the main snow area that sat between the trench and the like interior of Starkiller. So all that snow area I still needed to do. And then I basically hadn't done anything after the trench section. So there was a bit of a snow gap between the trench slash oscillator building and the forest, and then I also needed to do the forest as well. So there was a few ways that I thought I could try to tackle this, or at least put myself in a position to get anywhere near complete with this. I knew that Cult of Christensen was going to be coming, and I knew that David were going to be coming. So I was like, okay, what can I get done to basically put them in a position where I'm like, okay, look, this is all built up to this point. You guys can finish the rest of it with minimal effort in trying to design things. I know it's a lot of pressure to put on someone where it's like, oh yeah, like design this forest for me. So my goal was basically to build up the elevation to where it was necessary, and then come up with a tree design that was easy to replicate, so I could just tell them like, look, this is the tree design, this you know, the terrain's mostly built up, you guys can just fill in this area with trees, and hopefully it'll be a relatively simple thing for you to do. It might take some time, but at least you're not going to be sitting there trying to figure out how to design something, as opposed to just, you know, taking my tree design and making a bunch of them. So that was kind of my goal with that. But the thing that I personally needed to do was to just build up that elevation, like I said earlier. So I went through and I spent probably all of Tuesday night building up these little sections that the forest would need to be on, that those snow areas that I hadn't completed yet would need to be on. So then once those guys showed up, they'd be good to go, and I could basically assign them a task, and then I could go work on other stuff that needed to be done that really I could only do for the build. A few of the other things that did need to be done were the vehicles. I was fortunately able to find an LDD file for an first order snow speeder that I'd gotten like years back. So I built 2 of those real quick before they showed up, but there still needed to be 4 TIE fighters completed and 2 X-Wings completed. And I ordered all the parts for these, but that was like a ordeal in itself, because like I basically ordered those. I had to be a little bit over a week before this, because I knew like I'm going to give myself a week and hopefully these sellers can get these things shipped out on time. And it was kind of coming down to the wire, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit later in the video. But those were a few of the other things that needed to be done for this build. So that'll bring us to Wednesday. This is the day where Cult of Christensen arrived, and it was super awesome getting to meet him for the first time. Great guy to hang out with, great guy to build with. We have a decent amount of interests outside of LEGO, which was pretty cool, namely being monster trucks. So we spent a lot of our free time while he was here watching old monster truck videos, which was super cool. So when Colt arrived, I picked him up from the airport, which was like 45 minutes or so from my house, and we stopped by this local brickling seller. He basically has a warehouse, and I needed to pick up some parts fir trees and maybe a few other things for the mock. So we stopped by there, and it actually worked out kind of well because the airport was near his warehouse, and it was a cool experience getting to, you know, show Colt like this Bricklink warehouse, and also just getting to see it for myself. Like, there were just so many parts and sets and just cool Lego stuff there. So that was a fun little side venture. And then we hit rush hour traffic on the way back to my house. And that took forever. I mean, it was already not very close to my house, but it turned what was like a 45-minute trip to like an hour-and-a-half trip back to my house. So at this point, I'm already kind of like, man, like, we're not necessarily wasting time, but we burned up a lot of time having to sit in traffic. So that was pretty annoying. So when Colt got back to my house on Wednesday, I assigned him tile duty. I told him, look, I have all these squares, just start placing tiles all over these things. So I had maybe like a pick-a-brick case and a half just full of white tile, and I knew I had my little reserves of crate because I hadn't yet sorted all of crate. There were little chunks with white tiles on them in this big bin that I had, and I was like, well, we'll use that if we need to. We shouldn't. I didn't think we did. But, you know, we'll have that just in case. So he worked on that while I worked on just building up the forest section, building up the terrain, trying to not have it just be completely flat, but having at least a little bit of elevation. And that's basically what we did for the rest of the night. And I was super proud of Colt. Like, he knocked out a significant portion of tiles over on his section of the build, just covering all these colorful areas with the white tiles that we needed for snow. So that was awesome. So then that brings us to Thursday, the next day, because we stayed up, I think pretty late, probably until like at least 1 a.m., 2 a.m. working on that. The next morning, David comes in. I think at some point we just decided, you know, it probably isn't best for us to take what we had to the convention. We might be able to get more done working on it at my house. Thursday, I guess I didn't mention, is the first day of the convention, but we decided we're just gonna work on as much as we can on Thursday and then just take what we have on Friday, because, you know, all my parts are at my house. It'd just be easier to get more stuff done at my house than to try to take what we have and then realize we didn't break stuff, so have to make trips back and forth. You guys get the gist of it. So we go pick up David. We stopped by somewhere to grab some food. It was just a nice, friendly meeting. This was, you know, my second time meeting David. It was Colt's first time meeting David. So you all just sat down and talked, and we had a good old time. And then we made it back to my house, and I think what happened was, I think Colt like eventually just ran out of tiles, and I'm like, oh crap. So I gave Colt and David this giant bin of, you know, what was left of crate, just all these small little crate chunks. And I'm like, well, you know, there's tons of white tiles in this. It's not gonna be fun, but you guys can sit there and peel all these tiles off of these little plates and then use those in the mock. So they spent hours doing this. Like, they spent such a long time working on that. Meantime, I was just building up more trees, trying to get the forest to like halfway decent, you know, just trying to make some progress with the forest, honestly. And then after they finished getting all the tiles, we quickly realized there was just literally not going to be enough tiles. So what we ended up doing was removing a row of gray base plates from the build. So I think initially, on the forest side of the trench section, the build was supposed to be 4 gray base plates long. So then we decided, in order to make this work, we're gonna have to remove a row, and then hopefully we'll have enough tiles for the, like 3 gray base plates long of a section. So we make that executive decision. At this point, I'm not really in a position to complain. So then the next thing we started working on, or at least they started working on, were building up the walls to the sides of the build, because this was something that I saved to the very end of the mock. In hindsight, I do kind of regret it, but it made sense at the time. Basically, because of the trench section, everything around it had to be elevated like a foot off of the table, which meant that we had to fill that space on the side with white walls. And I was saving what I thought was a decent amount of white bricks for this section. And of course, it was not enough. It was not nearly enough. And that was like, kind of like oh crap, like what are we going to do? The solution I always had in the back of my head, I was like, if I did for some reason run out of white bricks to finish up those walls, I would just take plates and I would put more white tiles on them and then use those to kind of fill in the gaps. not knowing that I would also run out of white tiles. So we were just kind of screwed all around when it came to this. So then we started making calls to local Lego stores. I knew that my close Lego store didn't have any more white bricks, and that was basically the case with every single Lego store near me. I live basically in a city with 4 Lego stores, but then we found at the furthest Lego store from me, of course it would be the furthest one, and it's an hour away. They had white 1x3 bricks. So me and David made the journey across the city to go pick up these white bricks, and I think I bought at least like 13 or 14 pick-a-brick cups. Most of them were just white 1x3 bricks. Colt stayed behind to, I think, build up some pillars to basically function as filler under those elevated sections. And I mean, it was just crazy. Like, you know, we had planned to have all this time building, and then basically, you know, 2.5 hours, maybe even 3 hours of our time got taken away because I had to go run to the Lego store to buy white bricks. So David and I went to go pick those up, got back, and David just went right at it at just building up these white walls. He built so many of them. And then at some point we realized even that was probably not going to be enough. So I think in the long run, we did end up removing another section of like gray base plates from the build, which honestly probably worked out for the better, because if we had tried to fill up that section with tiles and had tried to build the walls around it, it just would not have worked. So I think David pretty early on was like, yeah, let's just condense this, because like, we don't want to be in a position where we've already built up all these walls and built up the ground, and then we can't fill it with tiles, or vice versa. We build up the ground and we can't build the walls around it. So that's essentially what we did all Thursday. Then came Friday. This was the day that we planned to actually go to the convention. So that morning we got up, we went and picked up the U-Haul. We had to use a U-Haul to transport the stuff. This wasn't like the big moving U-Haul. This was just a U-Haul van, which I thought was going to be ample room to transport this mock, right? So then one of the things we had to do was go pick up some more wood, because I was using wood under the build to keep everything level, because it's a nice hard level surface, and you just kind of sit that on the tables. But I did need more, because when I bought it initially, the mock just ended up being bigger than I thought it would be. So we go to Home Depot, and they literally just do not have the wood I need, like, at all. The cheapest wood they have there was like $50 per like 8 feet by 4 feet, I think is how they sell it, which is ridiculous. Like $30 is the wood that I needed, but of course they're out of it. There's like a lumber shortage or something like that going on. So that sucked. So we were eventually just like, you know what? Like, let's just hope the tables at the convention are straight, I guess. So we kind of just, you know, hope for the best that, you know, the tables wouldn't be insanely unleveled. So we got all the other supplies we needed, boxes, tape, all that good stuff. Then we got to my house again, and we had to start packing up. And man, this was probably, I think this was like the most like intensive labor we did, because moving those giant stage sections of Starkiller from upstairs to downstairs to the van was just such the task. It took all 3 of us, and it took such a long time because there were so many large chunks. A smart move that we did, and this was super necessary, was David actually suggested that we get some saran wrap, and we saran wrapped all of the like super tall sections, and that ended up being super crucial, because like once we were moving it, there were a few sections where all the supports on the inside just broke, and the only thing holding the build up was a saran wrap. So very smart call by you, David. You saved us a lot of time, a lot of headache, and probably a lot of tears by making that suggestion. So after hours of just trying to load this stuff into the van, we quickly realized like, oh, we're gonna have to make a second trip, which was something that I absolutely wanted to avoid, because the U-Haul place charges you by the mile. And this convention was not close to my house at all. The convention was like a 40 to 45 minute drive from my house. So I'm like, we got to load all this stuff in one go. But it was very obvious that no matter what we did, there was just no way that we were going to be able to get everything to the convention in one go. So we hit a stopping point, and we're like, we're just gonna have to make the second trip. So we go ahead, we take everything to the convention, I think probably around like 3 or 4 p.m. on Friday. And then I get there, and you know, everyone at the convention is like, I mean, like the people who are kind of heading Brick Rodeo, the coordinators for it, are making comments like, oh, nice for you to show up. And I'm just like, I mean, you think I chose for this to happen this way? You think I just wanted to show up late? Like, I've been working on my build, you know? But I don't, I guess they just assumed like, oh yeah, he just decided to show up late with his build, which was not the case at all. Like, trust me, if I had everything my way, I would have had everything set up on Thursday, and I would have been like somewhere taking a nap on Friday. But you know, we were just trying to get the build done. So we showed up and we set up as much as possible. Most of the sections got there in relatively decent condition. But that section of the hangar, oh my, like the entire thing just collapsed on the way there, which was super frustrating. Especially just hearing it, like I think we hit like one bump and that section just shattered all over the floor of the van. So we get there and we take all the stuff in, and fortunately I had a lot of good friends there who were willing to help, namely Caleb, Ricks, and Trevor. Those guys kind of volunteered to help reassemble that section, and I was just kind of like, you know, look, like, see, as much as you guys can do, you know, I don't expect you to finish the whole thing, but you know, I fortunately did videos documenting my process for most of this build, namely that section. And I was just kind of like, I mean, see what you guys can do, I guess, if you want to help work on it. So I feel like I kind of left that in good hands. Those guys are pretty good builders. Went back to my house, started packing everything up, and then we hit another wall. We realized we might have to make a third trip. There was just so many elements of this build that we had to get to this convention, and it just was not all going to fit in the U-Haul the second time. And at this point, I'm just like we got to figure something else out. I'm not making a third trip. Like, this is gonna significantly increase the price that I'm paying for this U-Haul, and I'm really not trying to do that right now. I've already spent way too much money just on Lego to build this thing. So fortunately, I did have a friend at the convention who volunteered to like help us bring stuff back, and it was funny too, because before we left, you know, to come back to my house to get the stuff, he's like, hey, if you need help, I have a truck. And I was like, nah, man, we got this. We shouldn't need any more help. We're just gonna put everything back in this U-Haul. And of course, I ended up having to call him. I'm like, look, hey, can you please go help me get the pieces of my mock? So fortunately, he did show up, and he had a truck, so we were able to get most things to the convention. There were a few little things they had to leave behind, but nothing crucial, at least that we needed at that moment. So then we just started building. There was this one moment, man, where we were, you know, getting the last few things from the van and from my car, because we took things in multiple vehicles to get to the convention. And I took a part of the trench. It was the first right part of the trench with that building on it, and I sat it on like this cart, and I knew it was super sketchy, like you needed to hold it when you moved it, but I figured I'm gonna be the one who moves it, so I'm gonna be able to take care of this. But then someone like needed my help with something, so I left it and I went to go help them with whatever they needed. And then like as I did that, David walks over and he's like, oh, like this cart's just sitting here, I'll just go take it. And he didn't realize just how jank it was, so he starts like turning the cart. And I'm like, I see it in my peripheral vision, and I'm like, no, David, you gotta hold that. And I swear, like, I just see the thing start tipping over, and I run over and I try to catch it, and I swear, like, dude, like, if I was just a little bit faster, bro, I could have caught it, but it just hit the ground outside of the convention center. Pieces flew everywhere. Some parts flew under the van that we had, and I was just like, oh my God, like, at that point, I decided, yeah, that part's just probably not going to be in the build. We're going to have to put something else there, because I know I'm not going to have enough time to rebuild it. And, like, it's such a complicated building that no one else is going to be able to rebuild that. Like, that thing is just done. But at this point, like, I can't really afford to get too stressed out over something like that. Like, I mean, yeah, I would have loved to have had that building in the mock, but, you know, it is what it is. I'm just going to have to put something else there. At this point, I just want to see the mock done. So everyone's, like, pulling out their flashlights, trying to find the pieces on the ground. We throw it all into a bin, and we take it into the convention center. I was pleasantly surprised to see that Caleb and Trevor did actually get a decent amount of that hangar section done. Like, that was so awesome. And I think like maybe a few hours into it, they completely finished one side, and then after that, the other side was basically just replicating it. So those guys made some pretty good progress on it. I think H2 Brick first started working on trying to reassemble like the trench sections. Like, those things were just kind of in total disarray. I think I was probably working on reassembling Snoke's throne room. That was just probably the worst part of all of this, because like it wasn't even the drive that made that thing fall apart. Like, me, Colt, and David all just tried to lift that in my room, and it immediately just collapsed. Like the way I built it was just not in such a way for it to be transported. So we just ended up tossing most of that into a bin. So I spent most of my time at the convention probably repairing that Snoke's throne room, which was not fun. One of the weird things, and not necessarily weird, I mean, I could have guessed that it would have happened, but it was weird because something you don't really think about when you're building over such a long period of time. If any of you ever built with a Lego clips, you know they get loose over time, and eventually just you have to replace them. Like they get so loose, like they won't hold themselves in at all. And I designed that Snoke's throne room so long ago, like I built it over a year ago, that by the time we started moving it, there were just chunks of the rocks and the walls, because I used the clips to connect the rocks to the walls. And they had just gotten so loose over time that there were just chunks of the rocks that were just falling off of the walls because the clips had just gotten loose over time. So that was really an unforeseen obstacle that was super annoying. It made it so frustrating trying to rebuild it, because you'd have a wall section built and then just random chunks of the wall would just start falling off. I think by the time everything ended on Friday, I had gotten the entire oscillator building set up. We had gotten a lot of the snow sections built up. Caleb somehow, I have no idea how he did it, but him and Trevor finished building the hangar section, but they somehow also finished building that just collapsed all over the ground, which was just insane to me. Like, this was not a simple build. I used a lot of, I mean, I wouldn't say super complex techniques, but just things that weren't obvious. Like, you'd really have to think about it to try to reverse engineer it, and just using like freeze frames from the video I did on it. Like, he was able to rebuild the thing. And I'm honestly not sure if I could have done that, which is just crazy, right? Like, I would have just been like, this is too overwhelming. But somehow he did it. Like, I mean, Caleb did a lot of unbelievable things at this convention, but I think him rebuilding that section of the trench was probably the most just like god tier builder moment. Like, I give him so much credit for being able to make that happen. All things considered, at the end of Friday night, it did feel like a victory insofar as, you know, we had a lot of obstacles that we hit. We had a lot of things that shattered, but we were at least on the right trajectory in some respects. We still had the complete forest to complete. We still had a lot of trees we had to build. I still had to finish up Snoke's throne room, which was, I knew, just going to be the most difficult task the next day. But I was fairly confident that, you know, the mock would probably look decent on Sunday. At this point, we accepted the fact, like, yeah, you know, the public's going to be coming in on Saturday. We're probably just going to be building throughout the entire first public day, but we could maybe get the mock done for Sunday. I would have been more than happy if that just for one of the public days of the convention, the mock would be somewhat presentable. So, you know, we went from like, oh yeah, you know, let's finish up the mock on Thursday and then just take it on Friday and then, you know, have it ready for the first public day, to maybe it'll be good to go on Sunday. Who knows?